Module 6 begins with Unit 10, Internet Fundamentals. This unit focuses on how the Internet works and how the information travels around the world. HTML will be covered separately. This lesson provides the foundation for understanding how the Internet works. We'll start by exploring what the Internet is, how websites are located and delivered to your browser, and the technologies that make online communication possible. We'll also talk about web browsers, search engine, cookies, and a few basic internet security practices that can help you stay safe online. By the end, you'll have a much better understanding of how the internet works behind the scenes every time you visit a website. So the internet is a worldwide network of interconnected computers and devices that communicate with one another. Instead of being a single computer or organization, the internet is made up of millions of smaller networks connected together across the globe. These networks allow people to share information, communicate, access online services, transfer files, and stream audio and video. The internet is often called a network of networks because it connects millions of smaller networks around the world. Your home Wi-Fi, your school's network, your workplace, your cell provider, and even government networks all operate independently. The internet allows these separate networks to communicate with one another, making it possible for information to travel across cities, countries, and even continents. This global connectivity allows you to send an email or participate in an online class, or access a website that's hosted on the other side of the world in just a matter of seconds. And even though these networks are owned and managed by different organizations, they work together using a common communication standard to form the internet. So what is the World Wide Web? Often called the web, the World Wide Web is just a collection of websites and web pages that are accessed through the internet. Many people use the terms internet and World Wide Web interchangeably, but they are not the same thing. The internet is a global network that connects computers and devices, while the web is one of the many services that uses that network. Every time you visit a website or watch a video in your browser, you're using the web. So the internet and the web are related, but they're not the same thing. The internet is the physical infrastructure, a worldwide network of interconnected devices. The web is a collection of websites and web pages that use the internet to share information. The web couldn't exist without the internet, but the internet supports many other services besides the web. For example, when you send an email or play an online game, you're using the internet, even though you may not be using the web. So a simple way to remember this is the internet is the highway, and the web is one of the many destinations that you can reach using that highway. So while the web is one of the most popular uses of the internet, it's far from the only one. The internet supports many different services that we rely on every day. Some of my favorite are streaming media that allows us to watch movies or watch live events without downloading an entire file first. Cloud storage gives us access to files from almost any internet-connected device. If you're using Weber's free cloud storage called Box, you don't have to carry a jump drive in order to organize all your files. You can just store it in cloud storage. And then voice over IP enables phone calls to be made over the internet instead of traditional phone lines. So these services demonstrate how the internet has become an essential part of our daily lives. And although they seem very different, they all rely on the same basic communication model. Whether you're visiting a website, sending an email, or streaming a movie, a client is requesting information from a server. Let's see how that process works. So most internet communications follow this client-server model. So a client is a computer or an application that requests information. while a server is a computer that stores information and responds to those requests. You can think of this like ordering food at a restaurant. The customer places an order, the kitchen prepares and delivers it. So the client makes the request and the server provides the response. For example, when you open your web browser and visit a website, your browser acts as the client by requesting that web page. The web server receives that request, finds the appropriate files, and then sends them back to your browser, which then displays the page. So every time you visit a website, several things happen behind the scenes in just a few seconds. First, you enter a web address or click a hyperlink in your web browser. Second, your browser begins the process of locating the website you requested. Third, once it finds the correct web server, it sends a request asking for that web page. Next, the server receives the request, locates the necessary files, and sends them back to your browser. And then finally, your browser displays the web page on your screen. On the next few slides, we're going to learn more about how the browser finds the correct web server and the technologies that make that process possible. So on the previous slide, we learned that after you enter a website's address, your browser needs to find the correct web server. To do that, every device connected to the internet has a unique IP address. An IP address works much like a street address. It tells the data exactly where to go. When you type a name like weber.edu, your browser doesn't actually communicate using that name. Instead, it uses the website's IP address to locate the correct server and request the web page. So why don't we just use IP addresses? Well, because people remember names a lot more easily than numbers. So domain names solve this problem. Computers communicate using IP addresses, but we can't remember that. Imagine trying to memorize the numeric address for every website you visit. It would be much more difficult than remembering names like google.com or weber.edu. So to solve this problem, websites are assigned a domain name. That's much easier for us to remember. Behind the scenes, the browser still needs the website's IP address. So the domain name is just a human readable name of a website. So instead of typing in that long IP address, we just type in a name like weber.edu or weather.gov. So while domain names make websites easier to remember, the computers still need the IP address. When you enter the domain name, your browser has to convert it into the correct IP address. And we do that using the domain name system. So the domain name system, or DNS, acts like the internet's phone book. When you type weber.edu into your browser, your computer contacts a DNS server and asks, what is the IP address for this website? The DNS server looks up the domain name, finds the corresponding IP address, and returns it to your browser. Once the browser has the correct IP address, then it knows exactly where to send the request. This entire process usually takes only a fraction of a second, so most people never realize that it's happening behind the scenes. Before DNS, we had to memorize, or better yet, write down the IP address of every website that we wanted to visit. Now we can just type in a domain name. So we've learned that domain names make websites easier to find. However, a URL, or Uniform Resource Locator, provides the complete address of the specific resource on the internet, like a web page or a document. The first part of a URL is the protocol, which tells the browser how to communicate with the web server. The next is the domain name, which identifies the website that you want to visit, like weber.edu. After the domain name, you may see one or more folders which organize content of the website, much like folders on your computer organize files. And then finally, we have a page or a file name. This identifies the specific resource the browser should retrieve, such as the document or the web page. Not every URL contains folders or file names, but every URL includes enough information for the browser to locate the requested resource. You can think of a URL like a mailing address. The domain name identifies the building that you want to visit, while the folders and the page name tell exactly where you want to go once you arrive, like the specific floor or the office number or the apartment. In the example URL, the first component was HTTPS, the protocol. You probably see this every day when you browse the web, but what does it actually mean? HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol, and it's just a standard set of rules that the web browser and the web server use to communicate with each other. Whenever you request a web page, HTTP defines how the information is exchanged between your browser and the server. HTTPS is a secure version. It works exactly the same way as HTTP, but it adds encryption to protect the information being transmitted. That's really important when you're logging into a website or making an online purchase. The simple way to identify a secure website is to verify the connection uses HTTPS. Most browsers also display a security indicator next to the website's address, such as a padlock or other security icon. For example, if I type in Weber's IP address, 137.190.8.10, directly into my browser, the browser warns me that the connection is not secure. That's because the website security certificate was issued for the domain name, not a numeric IP address. Although I can choose to continue to the website, the browser cannot verify that I'm communicating with the intended server. But if I type in weber.edu into my browser instead, the website loads over a secure connection. Most modern browsers no longer display the HTTPS portion of the address by default. But if I click in the address bar or copy the URL, I'll see that it begins with HTTPS. Depending on the browser, I'll also see a security indicator, such as a padlock or other security icon. These indicators tell me that the connection between my browser and the web server is encrypted and that the browser has verified the website's identity. While this doesn't guarantee that a website is trustworthy, it does mean that information exchanged between my computer and the website is protected while it travels across the internet. So what is a web browser? It's just a software application that allows you to access and view websites. When you enter a URL or click a link, the browser sends the request to the server. It receives the information and displays them in a format that you can read and interact with. Modern browsers all perform the same basic tasks, although they may have different features and user interfaces. So although a browser displays a website, it doesn't help you find them. That is the job of a search engine. So a search engine is a website or an online service that helps you find information on the internet. So instead of remembering the address of every website, you can enter keywords into a search engine. It searches its index of billions of web pages and returns a relevant list of results. The important thing to remember is that a search engine is not the same thing as a browser. A browser is the software you can use to access websites. The search engine helps you locate the websites that you're looking for. Another thing to know about is a cookie, which is a small text file that a website stores on your computer or mobile device through your web browser. Cookies can help the website remember information about you, like your login status, your language preferences, items that you put in your shopping cart. This allows the website to provide a faster and more personalized experience every time you visit. Have you ever wondered when you go back to a website, you may not have to log in, or it may remember your login information, or it may actually remember what you have put in a shopping cart. That's because of cookies. But some cookies are also used to track your browser activity, so the website can collect information about you and display targeted ads. Most browsers allow you to manage or even delete cookies and choose whether or not to accept them. You should always choose to not accept any unnecessary cookies. Browsers can make browsing the web, cookies can make browsing the web more convenient by remembering the information, but because we share so much information online, it's important to understand how to protect ourselves while using the internet. So let's look at a few simple internet security practices that everyone should follow. Since we use the internet every day, it's important to practice safe online habits. Some simple steps can greatly reduce your risk of becoming a victim of cybercrime. Always use strong, unique passwords. Always keep your software and your web browser up to date with the latest security patches. Before entering any personal information, verify you're visiting the correct website, and then look for HTTPS and the padlock icon in the browser's address bar or other security indicators. Be cautious when clicking on links in emails or text messages or on unfamiliar websites because they can lead to malicious pages. And finally, just avoid sharing sensitive information unless you trust the website or the organization that's requesting it. We're going to explore these topics in greater detail when we study cybersecurity and personal digital security later on in the semester. So let's bring everything together by following the journey of a web page. It all begins when you enter a URL into your browser and click a hyperlink. If you entered a domain name, the browser first contacts a DNS server to translate that name into the website's IP address. Once that's known, the browser sends the request across the internet to the appropriate web server. The server receives the request, locates the requested web page, and sends the necessary files back to your browser. And finally, your browser processes those files and displays it on your screen. Although this process involves several steps and multiple computers communicating with each other, it usually happens in a matter of seconds or even less. Every time you visit a website, this same basic sequence occurs behind the scenes. So this is a vocabulary lesson. The internet is a global network that connects computers. The web is a collection of websites that run on a network. A browser receives and displays web pages, while a client is the device or application making the request. Every device connected to the internet has a unique IP address, but instead of remembering numbers, we use domain names, like weber.edu. The DNS translates that domain name into an IP address so the browser can find it. The URL is a complete address of a web page, and HTTP is a protocol used to transfer web pages between a browser and a server. HTTPS is the secure, encrypted version that protects your information as it travels across the internet. So today we explored the technologies that make it possible to access information on the internet. We learned that the internet is a worldwide network that connects computers and that the web is a collection of websites that run on that network. We discussed how clients and servers work together to request and deliver web pages, and how IP addresses, domain names, and DNS help the browsers locate websites. We also learned that a URL provides a complete address of a web page, and that HTTPS defines how browsers and servers communicate. Finally, we looked at the role of web browsers, search engines, cookies, and basic internet security practices. So understanding these concepts provides the foundation for learning how websites are built, which is the focus of our next lesson on HTML.